The decade of the 1990s ushered in the information age and witnessed the end of the industrial age. It was a decade that saw strong economic growth worldwide following the economic malaise of the 1970s. The 1990s brought about the spread of freedom and the end of the Cold War and communist totalitarianism. However, it was also a decade that experienced an increase in ethnic cleansing and an uptick in terror attacks in the United States. The 90s saw the growth of the World Wide Web and the personal computer. In 1991, when the World Wide Web first became available to the public, it grew dramatically, with users multiplying at the rate of about 3,500 times a year. By the year 2000, there was an estimated 295 million users on the internet. This in turn caused a continuing revolution in communication and business, with e-commerce sites like eBay and Amazon.com changing the way people shop. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 symbolized the collapse of European communist governments and graphically ended the Iron Curtain divide of Europe. On October 3, 1990, Germany reunified, and in December 22nd of 1990, Lech Walesa became Poland's president, and by July 1st, 1991, the Warsaw Pact with Russia ended. In the early 90s, the Soviet Union itself began to crumble as liberal reforms proved difficult to handle, and changes to the centralized economy were badly transitioned and caused major problems. After a series of revolutions in Soviet bloc states and a failed coup by conservative elements opposed to the ongoing reforms, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. In the 1990s, the U.S. played the role of world policeman, sometimes alone, but more often in alliances. The decade began with Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait and the resultant Gulf War to drive him out. In 1993, war was in the African country of Somalia, as television images of starving children led to an attempt to oust the warlord General Mohammed Farah Aidid. In September of 1994, American troops were sent to Haiti to overthrow a military dictatorship. The fall of communism in the early 1990s led to ethnic tensions and instability in Yugoslavia, as republics like Croatia, Slovenia, and Macedonia declared their independence, and Serbia, under Slobodan Milosevic, fought to keep Yugoslavia together under Serbian domination. In 1996, about 20,000 American troops were deployed to Bosnia as part of a NATO peacekeeping force. In March of 1999, the U.S. joined NATO in airstrikes against Yugoslavia in an effort to halt ethnic cleansing in the Yugoslav province of Kosovo. The decade was to end as much as it began, with U.S. forces deployed in many countries and the U.S. playing arbitrator, enforcer, and peacekeeper throughout the world. On the domestic front, Democrats under President Bill Clinton tried and failed to pass laws on big issues like health care, Social Security reform, and gun control, but did pass welfare reform. On January 1st, 1994, the North American Free Trade Agreement, known as NAFTA, went into effect with Canada, the United States, and Mexico, creating one of the largest free trade areas in the world. However, President Clinton was impeached and narrowly survived a trial for perjury and obstruction of justice over an inappropriate relationship with the White House intern Monica Lewinsky. Many of the major events of the 90s dealt with acts of violence. In 1992, South Central Los Angeles rioted after 4 white policemen were acquitted of videotaped assault charges for the beating of a black motorist, Rodney King. February 1993 brought terrorism to America as a bomb was detonated in a garage beneath the World Trade Center, killing 6 and injuring over 100. On February 28, 1993, agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms attempted to raid the compound of the Branch Davidians at Waco, Texas, led by cult leader David Koresh. 4 agents and 6 Branch Davidians were killed, leading to a 51-day standoff. On April 19, 1993, the FBI launched a tear gas attack to try to force the Branch Davidians out. A fire broke out, engulfing the compound, killing 76 men, women, and children, including the leader, David Koresh. Americans were glued to their TV sets in 1995 as football star O.J. Simpson was arrested and tried for the murder of his ex-wife Nicole and her friend Ronald Goldman, and many were shocked when Simpson was found not guilty. The shock of the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City on April 19, 1995, which killed 168 and injured 680, was compounded by the revelation that it was not done by foreign terrorists, but by American citizens led by a U.S. Army veteran, Timothy McVeigh, and his associate, Terry Nichols. The bombing was timed to coincide with the second anniversary of the deadly fire that ended the Branch Davidian siege at Waco, Texas. And in the months between February 1996 and April 1999, there were at least 14 incidents of school shootings, with the most lethal one being April 20th, 1999, when 14 students and 1 teacher were killed and 23 wounded at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. Some technology of the 90s included the Hubble Space Telescope, the first in-car navigation systems, airbags, bagless cyclonic vacuum cleaners, satellite digital TV, DVDs, the English Channel Tunnel connecting France and England, and on July 5, 1995, Dolly the sheep was the first mammal to be successfully cloned, and in 1998, something that we take for advantage today, the search engine Google, 1998. Some fads of the 90s included Beanie Babies, Furby, digital pets such as Tamagotchi, line dancing was popular, Pokemon, Tickle Me Elmo, the Power Rangers, all kinds of items with WWJD, which was to remind everybody to ask, what would Jesus do? Where's Waldo was a big game, minivans were everywhere, and rollerblades were popular. On November 6, 1995, Cleveland Browns owner Art Modell announced he had reached agreement to move the Browns to Baltimore. Subsequent legal action saw a unique compromise that would set a precedent in American pro sports. Modell would be able to retain the Browns' existing player and staff contracts, but his team would officially be a new franchise, the Baltimore Ravens. Meanwhile, the Browns' name, history, colors, and archives would stay in Cleveland, and a new Browns team would begin play in 1999. On the other hand, the Cleveland Indians, after well over 30 years of terrible baseball, came to life in the 90s under owner Dick Jacobs and GM John Hart. In 1994, Hart hired Mike Hargrove as manager, and Hart made great trades to bring in players like Sandy Alomar, Carlos Baerga, and Kenny Lofton, and developed players like Albert Bell, Manny Ramirez, and Jim Thome in the minors. In 1994, the Indians moved to a new ballpark, Jacobs Field, gave the Indians more revenue to sign veteran free agents like Eddie Murray, Dennis Martinez, and Oral Hershiser. During the last half of the 90s, the Indians won several Central Division championships and 2 AL pennants and brought baseball excitement not seen in the area since the middle of the 50s. Here at the church, the 90s opened with Bud Oshevsky as pastor and Mike Prenovich as associate pastor, working closely with the youth group. Pastor Mike also did some evangelism explosion training and led a Navigators 2-7 discipleship. We had a lot of active youth in the 90s, and in 1990, Andy Jennis and David Gable went on Operation Barnabas, and Jenny Sauer went on the Time program. In May of 1991, Pastor Mike left to start a church in Kent. In 1992, the church voted to replace our old church organ with a pipe organ. In 1994, Jason and Marcy Haymaker joined our staff as youth pastor. Jason encouraged the teens to submit names for the youth group, and the youth committee selected David Gable's entry to name the group after 1 Timothy 4:12, which is, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in life, in love, in faith, and in purity." So 412 Ministries was born. In 1994, missionaries that the church supported, including the Burkes, the Mensingers, the Greens, the Hawkins, Kearns, and the McCammons. And two of those, Nancy Inch Green and Julie Moyne Hawkins, grew up here at the church. In 1995, CE National awarded 412 Ministries as Youth Group of the Year. And in 1996, Jason resigned to serve as senior pastor at Macedonia Grace Brethren Church. In 1997, Stan Nairn worked part-time as a visitation pastor. And in 1998, the church worked with Calvary Baptist and First Baptist on the Jesus Video Project to distribute the Jesus Video to every home here in Rittman. That year we added Jim Zidane to the staff and had a lot of children and youth ministries going very well. In 1999, Kim Moshevsky went on Operation Barnabas, and the church first started taking ministry trips back to Pastor Bud's hometown of Philadelphia to work at Urban Hope. The youth group had a puppet ministry going on, and our Christmas program in 1999 was an old-fashioned family Christmas with Grandpa, played by Gene Moyne, telling stories from his rocking chair. And that's what happened in the 90s.